Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to another NMRAx. We've got three different clinic presenters here today to enlighten you and entertain you. First up, we've got Lloyd, but before that, we'll have a mention of a few things we got coming up in the NMRA in the next, the next 3 or 4 months. We've got our convention coming up shortly in Long Beach. So I'll have to have a talk with a few of the crew and see who's going to Long Beach, and we'll have a mention of that. But first of all, we're going to travel all the way to the frozen tundra of Canada to meet with our friend Lloyd, who's going to tell us all about water today. And I think it's going to be in its three states: in steam, in liquid, and most commonly, I think, around his area in a solid form called ice. But anyway, uh, continuing his regular series on scenery, I'd like to hand it over to Lloyd. Take it away.
Thank, thank you, Marty. By the way, today was 22, so it was a very warm
22.
day. Yeah, there's
That'd
no
be
more
a
snow.
that'd be a
No
heat
more.
wave with you, wouldn't it? You'd be out in shorts and t-shirt
Soon, soon.
soon, soon.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
not. It's 22 Celsius, not 22 Fahrenheit.
well, it's starting to get cold here now because I've had to turn the air conditioning off, and I can actually open the door during the day. So we know we're heading towards winter. It'll be freezing here soon. It'll probably be around about, or I'd say 18 degrees. It's looking outside. It says it's 14 at the moment at here. So that'll be a bit chilly outside for me. But anyway, I've been to
Yeah,
Springfield and I know it gets a lot colder.
we're just switching places, right?
Yeah, we're
You're
just
just
swapping over. Yep,
yeah,
yep,
yeah.
yep.
Okay, so let's start um, by sharing. So we're going to be, this is what I call my pillar number 3 out of 6. We've done mountains, we've done grass, now we're doing water. Um, Basically, it's to look at different ways of making water. Um, we've got the easy one, which is basically just painting, but you need to add probably some gloss, some acrylic gloss or Mod Podge or some resin to make it look like clear, but some people will just use paint and cover it with varnish. Then you've got the acrylic glossy gel. Um, by the way, this presentation was done at our division, St. Lawrence division. And we had three other clinicians that talked about water. We had Bob Farquhar, who talked about acrylic glossy. We had Chris Helen, who spoke about Mod Podge. And then we had Malcolm Bent that spoke about the water surfaces or anything extra. So we're going to go through all of these, and I'll be presenting what the other presenters were presenting. So the first one is just basically paint. You have to be like kind of an artist to be able to blend the different colors of paint. And if you're like me, I started with a big area, and by the time I got to blending, well, the paint was already dry, so that didn't work too well. So with paint, you use a light colored paint from the edge to a darker shade to the middle, and then you blend the two different colors. So it's easier to start with small areas. And then once dry, then you could apply a glossy varnish or Mod Podge or gel to give it the like the glossy look. And if you want to give it more coats, you can do that too, depending on if you want to do waves or like small waves or big waves. And the cost of doing so in this example is about 15 cents a square foot, which is basically the paint. And by the way, when I say 15 cents, this is Canadian money. So we're probably talking about 10 cents American. Then we're going to talk about gel. Um, I'll explain a little bit later what we did. This was an example. We had 4 examples of ways of doing it. So the gel, again, we use a light colored paint from the edge to a darker shade in the middle and blend the different colors. Once dry, apply a medium or a heavy gel and repeat if necessary. Depending on the thickness, calculate many days to completely dry. When I tried it, I did bigger waves than normal, and it took about a week to dry. I mean, not the top part, but inside you could see the whitish color of the gel. And by the time it really became clear, it was a week long. So do it in small layers. So it costs us about 55 cents a square foot for the paint and the gel. The gel was Liquitex, if I'm not wrong. Mod Podge, it's it's not a very thick, but again, to sorry, the way of doing it is the same, where you put light colored paint to dark, you blend the colors, but once dry, you apply the glossy Mod Podge. It makes it look really glossy, but the more coats you put, the for creating, like I said, creating waves, um, it really makes a difference. And again, depending on the number of layers, calculate many days to completely dry. And the cost is about 25 cents a square foot for the paint and the Mod Podge. But make sure it is the glossy Mod Podge, not the matte. There's also the plexiglass. Um, it's a little bit harder to do if you're doing a big lake or if you're doing rivers with rapids. But it's not necessarily a cheap way, but it's also an easy way of doing it. Again, it's the same basic light colored paint to dark, and of course blending the colors. Once you Once the paint is completely dry, then you cover the area with a piece of plexiglass, about a 1/16, and you and you glue it with hot glue directly on the, like leaving a gap between what you've painted to create some type of dimension if you want. Then you cover the plexiglass with a coat of Mod Podge or gel to create the waves. So the cost is about $2.25 a square foot for the paint, the Mod Podge, and the plexiglass. It's a little bit more expensive. Then you've got the resin epoxy. This one is there's plenty out there. You could get some from Woodland Scenics, or just like buying epoxy and resin with a hardener, where you mix them together. So again, about the painting, but what you got to do is make sure the area is fully leak proof. I think most of us have got the problem of having leaks, so it's very important that it's totally leak proof and clean. Now, somebody was mentioning about not using styrofoam. You can use styrofoam as a base, but it has to be fully covered. Usually you'd cover it with sculpture mold or plaster. Paint won't be enough, because if you miss a spot, you're gonna have problems with the resin. It will create a reaction between the styrofoam and your resin. So you make sure it's fully covered. That you, I know that I tried putting a coat of glue all over, but that wasn't enough either. So sculpture mold was my source, my go-to. Um, so what you have to do is take the two bottles, or one, like I said, one is the epoxy, the other one is a hardener, and it's usually 50-50. A good mix, you got to mix it really good. And once you pour it, it will create bubbles, and that you have to remove. You could do that with a blowtorch, or you could blow through a straw. But if you have a big area, you might run out of breath. So they sell those small torches. Just make sure that you haven't done your static grass before, or you don't have any stuff that could burn around. And once you've done so, then cover it to dry. You don't want any dust or any particles falling over it. Um, Once it's done and it's dry, usually give it 24 hours. It will dry before that, but the bottom part might not be fully dried. So give it a chance to have it completely dry. Uh, Sorry. Um, so the cost is about $50 a square foot for paint, and that's based on a thickness of about half an inch of resin. Um, I know that the Woodland Scenics water, you can only pour 1/8 of an inch at a time, because the more, if you pour more than that, you're going to have shrinkage, cracking, and you're going to have to restart. While the epoxy resin, you could go up to, if I'm not wrong, 2 inches deep, but I don't think you need 2 inches. Um, the other thing too with resin is you could leave it clear, or you could put a drop of, I I put acrylic paint, uh, but a drop at a time, because you can't go backwards. So basically the four types here, you've got Mod Podge at 25 cents a square foot, acrylic gel 55 cents a square foot, plexiglass at 225 square foot, and resin $50 a square foot. Resin is the most expensive. Um, so um, it's so basically it's based on what when you're doing water, it's based on what you can afford, and it's also the time consuming. If you're doing epoxy, you gotta let it um, dry for, let's say, a day, while Mod Podge, it dries pretty fast. Now, when it comes to waterfalls or rapids, um, use a gel or clear caulking or water effects from Woodland Scenics. What you do is make strips on a piece of wax paper, and once dry, remove it and install it on the scene. The cost is about $17 a square foot for water effects. Um, when you're doing a river, like especially rapids, if you have different levels of your river, you can pour epoxy on the different levels and finish with a gel in between the levels, so to create some type of rapids, or and also around the rocks. So this part here was by Chris Helen. We talked about using Mod Podge, modeling water with Mod Podge. So what is Mod Podge? Well, it's polyvinyl acetate. It's, you could have matte, gloss, gloss medium. You could, wood glue is also polyvinyl acetate, white glue, etc. But Mod Podge is just a cheaper brand. It is non-toxic. It's, you can clean it with soap and water. It dries fast, dries clear, and can be tinted with acrylic paint. Water resistance once dry and inexpensive. But of course, if you're going to add, you could add water to the Mod Podge, but then you're removing the the gloss, your Mod Podge will become more matte. So how is it used to model water? So it provides a glossy coating, like a wet look, and can be stippled to provide surface texture. Example, to add ripples or wavelets to replace the perfectly flat surface of plexiglass or poured epoxy water models. It doesn't add depth because you won't be able to see right through. It's a coarser texture possible by using acrylic gloss gel. The difference between the two, between a gloss gel and Mod Podge is more liquid. So at one point it just flattens out, while the gel really stays as you put it. So you got to prepare your surface, level, smooth. Example, eliminate wood grains. And like I said, can add ripple textures at this stage if desired. And use colors to stimulate depth. The depth you could do prior, you could paint it before. When you're putting the Mod Podge, you don't have to. You could do 2, 3, 4 layers of Mod Podge, or you could just do one and just create your waves right away. This was his daughter working on a little diorama for school. You can see like she's blending the colors. And this is after putting Mod Podge, where the first coat was applied with a big paintbrush, and then he came back and did the waves. So you apply gloss medium, the entire surface with a large brush. Let stand for about 10 minutes. Gently stipple with a stiff brush to create ripples, or use compressed air 6 to 8 inches from the surface to simulate wind. It will shrink slightly as it dries, and texture will become more subtle. Here she was working on the river, painting the river with different colors, and then they applied the Mod Podge. You can see the ripples, and then came back and added more Mod Podge to his liking. So as you can see, it comes out white, but once it dries, it comes out clear. So caution, use thin coat. Example, don't pour it. Thick coat may crack while drying. Use gentle strokes when applying and stippling to avoid creating air bubbles. If you do get air bubbles, using air gun to kind of blow your Mod Podge, that could eliminate the bubbles. And it can be thin with water, but like I said, will diminish gloss. So this was the final result. As you can see, Mod Podge, depending on the color of the paint that you're going to put underneath, will create some type of depth to your scenery. And again, here he dry brushed some white paint over the Mod Podge, the ripples of the Mod Podge. And again, now modeling water with acrylic glossy gel. This was Bob Farquhar. These are the types, what's available. You could do it with hot glue, fiberglass strands covered with Envirotex, silicone sealant, acrylic gloss gel, 6000 glue and sealant, and Mod Podge. Now, some will turn yellow with time, depending on the thickness or the color of the paint you have in the back of it. When applying Mod Podge, this is what it looks like. So you can create big waves, and it will dry that way. But the thicker it is, like I said, the longer it will take to dry. Here's another example of before it dries. So what kind of products are available? Like I've said before, we've got Liquitex, Mod Podge, then you've got Envirotex, you got casting resin, you got realistic water, and easy water. Realistic water is the one that I was talking about, where you can put about 1/8 of an inch at a time. Casting resin is the mix with the resin and the hardener. Envirotex is about the same. It's the same thing. Easy water, I think that's the one that you, if I'm not wrong, you have to boil. I never used it, but I can't remember what he talked about. But if I'm not wrong, those are the beads that do melt. So those are the products that you could use for, again, for making water. So the first method we're going to look at is using latex caulking. Especially if you're doing falls or rapids, you lay out some plastic wrap, and then you lay caulk in rows, approximate length of the waterfalls needed. And using cardboard or paper, pull the caulking from the top to bottom, and then wait 10-15 minutes for caulking to set. And you could give it a second layer if you want it thicker, or you do thin layers and you could put 2 or 3 layers together. Now, remove the dry caulk from the saran wrap, and you can see the one on the right is thin. The two on the left are thicker. The thin one, you've got a better chance of having it clear. So if you want to see the back of your waterfall, if you want to see the rock work that you've done, I would go with the thin layer. Now, try not to roll the silicone off the plastic wrap, as the silicone will stick to itself. It's still very sticky though. And then you dry brush with some white paint. Second method is using gloss medium gel. So you put a glob of medium on a stick and plop it on the paper backing. You could also use wax paper. The reason that he used a paper backing is that when he was able to remove it, there's little fibers of paper that's stuck in the back to give it a little bit more of a texture. Using the stick, smooth out the medium to the length of the waterfall. Then after, let it dry for just a few minutes. And using the stick, dry through the medium, making lines. Do this lightly. Keep doing this until you're satisfied with the shape. You could always come back and give it a second coat where, let's say, where you've missed. Once it has dry, cut away the excess backing paper. and water out of the culvert using a piece of caulking. Like I said, see, like it looks, you've got dirt coming out of the pipe. But on a wax paper, it will be totally clear. Then we go into modeling water surface effects. Once you've created your nice glass smooth surface of water using your choice of resin or other products, you might want to make waves, or at least ripples. Rarely is water perfectly still. Either the current or the wind creates pattern on the surface, from small ripples to waves. There are several specific products from Woodland Scenics and Vallejo to create surface effects, but you can also use gloss medium and varnish, gloss medium gel, gloss medium heavy gel, or gloss Mod Podge. Each has their own use. I know that the heavy gel, this one is very thick, and you're basically sculpting your gel to what you want it to look like. So the gloss medium and varnish is useful for making small wet areas like puddles and creeks with no depth. It can also be used as a top coat over deep resin pores to provide some surface effects. Um, he didn't find it as effective as gloss Mod Podge, but this since is runnier and you have to wait until it sets a bit before surface effects will stay in place. Um, yeah, the more liquid it is, the, the harder it is to get real nice ripples. Um, for the left example, the medium was left to set a bit. Sorry, I can't read what because it's at the bottom of the screen. Um, the medium was blown. Oh yeah, he used um, no, gee, a straw to blow. It's just that when you're doing a big area, it's not always the best thing. Gloss medium gel and gloss medium heavy gel are good for more dramatic waves effect. Usually the ordinary gel works well enough. A thick layer of heavy gel can take a day to set completely and turn clear. So an example with gel, um, this gel goes on white and dries clear. Stipple with the aid of a brush, it makes good choppy waves. Like I said, if you look at the picture from the middle, it will dry fast. I mean, it will inside a day it's dry, but then you'll see a lot of the white still not dry. Uh, Even though you pass your finger over it, I mean, you can feel it's hard. But for the white to completely disappear, it'll probably take a few days. So gloss medium gel can also be used effectively to make running water in creeks and rapids. Once the gel has dried, some careful application of white paint to the ripples can enhance the rapid effect. Here's a gentle stream example. So, like I said, not the heavy gel, but the medium gel. The fact that you're able to sculpt, let's say from the rocks down, uh, you can create splashes, and it will dry that way. This is a gentle stream example. White paint has been added to enhance the gentle rapids. The dry brushing with the white paint also, and like it does enhance the flow of the water, and like around the rocks especially. Here's a gentle wind surface effect with gel and a spatula. So it doesn't take that much gel to create a good surface. Now, of course, you won't see the bottom of your stream or the bottom of the lake, Um, but that's up to you to decide what kind of um, what kind of color you want your lake to be. Like for example, around where I live, the water is totally brown. It's a light brown, but there's no way you will be able to see the bottom. So maybe 4 or 5 dashes of brown paint was enough to give it the color I wanted. Or I there's another one. There was a like a pond which was like kind of green, dark green, and again you couldn't see the bottom. But doing those waves, yeah, those little windy waves, if you want, makes a difference. So here are some examples of the use of gel and gloss medium. These are from a book by a master military modeler, Per Olav Lund. A WW1 German aircraft has ditch in the sea, as you can see on the right. Um, Much like we have done, the basic shape was made with styrofoam, and then scalpel mold was used to create like the base, and um, and then the gel was added. The foamy area was created by adding white acrylic gel, stippled vertically with a brush. Then it was covered with valuable still water to get the gloss. Using gloss clear gel medium painted white would probably also work. The crash and wave edge was formed with a kitchen sponge and gel. He's found that gloss Mod Podge is better than gloss medium and varnish for creating subtle surface effects. It's thicker to start with and sets up fairly fast so that it keeps the surface effect without self-leveling it out. So here was laid on a thick level coat and then stippled with the flat side of half-inch white brush. He was doing all those tests with plexiglass to see different shapes and results using all the um, available products. Some other effects made with gloss, Mod Podge, and a brush. But you can see compared to the gel, it's not as thick as gel would be because the Mod Podge is more runny. Here are some small waves, such as might be found on a river or lake. It started with a leveled out covering of gloss Mod Podge, which was then lightly blown upon with a soda straw to form waves. This is an early attempt, but most of these effects practice makes perfect. Uh, I know that during our clinic, the hands-on portion, people were all blowing through straws and trying to create um, like the perfect wave. Um, it was fun. Here are gentle ripples on a stream with old railway pilings. That reminds me, epoxy or has a tendency to go up whatever you've got sticking out of the water. So that's something you have to be careful of. They also added underwater effects with bits of plants material used to represent roots. Banks and shorelines will eventually have bulrushes and lily pads. One of the That's because everybody who participated in the clinic, we had a hands-on clinic which lasted about 3 hours, and people had to get people more involved. Everybody was building a diorama, and that's what he was doing with his water here. Um, Streams. Uh, Basically, this was the hands-on clinic for the afternoon. So this is a presentation of how people were going to do the clinic. So everybody had a piece of styrofoam So they had to carve the piece of styrofoam for a stream in a rectangular form. Not like this picture, but like rectangular because we were going to use a plexiglass. Um, then it was cleaned with a metal brush and using a mixture of 50-50 water, white glue, and we dabbed the whole area, including the banks, and we inserted a piece of tissue and dabbed more glue mixture with a paintbrush. So it kind of gave the ripple effect with the uh, we're using toilet paper. Um, and we repeated that layer four or five times by always dabbing and pushing with the paintbrush. So some created bigger ripples. So everybody was doing this. Um, and while it's wet, start painting from the middle with a dark color. Add a lighter color on both sides of the darker area. And since the area is wet, mix the colors by blending them. It was much easier because everything was wet and the paint just kind of was flown like in each other. So it was easier to blend. Um, at this point, if adding Mod Podge, gel, or resin, let it dry. Um, but today we will install a plexiglass on top. So if you want to use, yeah, so it's very important that if you're going to use Mod Podge, gel, or resin, that it is completely dry, especially resin, because the fact that it's humid, it's wet, the resin does not like humidity. Like the top part might be dry, but the bottom won't be dry. It'll still be wet, still be runny. So you got to make sure that it's totally dry. And if you're using Mod Podge or gel, well, you're just going to blend it with the paint. So you got to wait till it's totally dry. Now, put dabs of hot glue on the four corners, install the plexiglass on top. But do not install the plexiglass on the paint because then you're going to smear it all. And because they were doing that in the afternoon, the paint didn't have time to dry. So by putting dabs of hot glue, the plexiglass was not touching the paint. Once this was done, they used Mod Podge or gel to create a surface with moving water. And again, they were told, be careful not to make bubbles. Then they created a muddy bank, mixed dirt with white glue, and add a little water to reach a very pasty mud. Put the muddy paste on both edges of the plexiglass, creating a wavy bank. While it's drying, use a spatula to lift the paste, giving it texture. If the Mod Podge is dry, use white paint and dry brush it in the elevated parts of the water surface. So that was the entire project for the afternoon. And everybody was participating, and it, it looked really good. Picture doesn't always give a good result, but live it was great. We didn't have time to do the grass. The people they did it at home. As you can see, some of the members were carving. They were supposed to carve in a rectangular way, but it was corrected afterwards. This is when they were putting the tissues with the white glue mixed with water, creating different, like I said, different layers. Yeah, and using Mod Podge, blowing the Mod Podge to create the waves. And then the following month, people brought in their work that they did on their diorama. So this was an example here where there was like, it was a pond. Another one here was a stream. It wasn't completely finished. There's water coming from the right and flowing downwards to the water. Here's another one. With the rock work, he was going to use gel because it was mainly going downwards. That's something you can't do with resin, so gel was much better. As you can see, like we've done um, the mountains, we've done the grass, and now we're doing water. And the following month, we were going to do trees. So everybody, to get everybody motivated, so everybody was building a diorama about 16 by 24 to incorporate everything that we were going to teach during those 6 clinics. So the next one was going to be trees, because there's so many types of trees to be that could be done. Then we were going to follow it with roads, and the last one, details. Today was at our division meeting. Today was the last one. It was all about details. So I think that's it for water. Our next clinic on NMRAx is June 29th, and we're going to talk about trees, a bunch of trees. It's going to be the presentation that we gave at our division. Since we're from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, it probably won't be the same type of trees that, let's say, California or Arizona, but the idea will be pretty much the same.
Excellent.
And that's it.
Excellent. Excellent. It was a quite an interesting presentation there on different water effects. I noticed in a few of them, you've mentioned a few methods I've seen done over here. I know when you use the commercial products, I had a bit of a story about a friend of mine who did a rather large lake using the Woodlands Easy Water, except with the humidity and the heat we get in Queensland, it expands quite a bit. And at about 3 o'clock in the morning, he heard this explosion come from the train room, like a gas main had gone off. And when he went in there, the lake had exploded, and there were shards of easy water all over the train room. And for about the next 6 months, every time we'd have an op session in there, where we'd find something that stopped working because there's a shard of easy water jammed in there. So yeah, with the humidity and the heat here, that didn't used to work that well. But
well, my first try with the epoxy resin, I just did a small lake under my covered bridge, and everything looked nice until I got downstairs the next morning and there was no more water in my lake. It had dripped all over the floor.
oh dear.
That was a no. Yeah, so
I
things
noticed
happen.
one of the nicest water effects I think I ever saw was a modeler in Australia by the name of Jeff Knott. Now, there's a blatant push here for the NMRA History of Scale Model Railroading exhibit at the California State Rail Museum. When you roll up there, the first layout you see when you walk in is Smuggler's Cove, which is an England layout based on New England on the waterfront there. And the ocean and the lapping waves really got me. And I said to Jeff, I said, how did you get the peaks and the troughs in the waves there? And one of the tricks he used to do was use just standard house paint, but put it in the fridge for about 2 or 3 days beforehand, and the house paint would turn to like a gel. He said it was all worked out well until one day one of his kids came in and asked what that funny yogurt was that was in the fridge. So he said the only other thing he recommended is make sure you label the container. So yes, but all those different types that you had there, Lloyd. What's your favourite type of method of doing water?
Um, Personally, I'll go with the resin because most of the water around here is dark. Uh, you won't see the bottom, so I don't have to put in like to put an inch or half an inch. I could go a quarter of an inch. It's
Yes,
just that my water is um like putting dabs of acrylic paint, just finding the right color is plenty. I mean, you don't have to go big. Um, I had a bad experience with the Woodland Scenic one. Everything was cracked and shrunk, and I said,
right.
okay, and that's because I didn't read on the bottle that said an eighth of an inch instead of an inch.
Yes,
Um, when we did the plexiglass during the clinic, I was surprised how how it really turns out. If you got some really nice clear plexiglass, um, you got something really nice. You don't have to like you could have, let's say, a quarter of an inch or a half an inch between, and you could put stuff in rocks, and you will be able to see that the bottom of your river.
yes, yeah. It's
But yeah,
amazing with
yeah.
some of the effects that you can have with water. I've been watching a few of the scale military modelers, and when they do ships or even some of them
Oh,
when they've done a submarine that's been say damaged by a depth charge or something, and they'll do it in a nearly a 1 foot square slab of epoxy that they pour basically or resin that they pour, and they tend to pour the whole thing in one foul swoop. And
yeah, but that's a special epoxy. Well, not a special epoxy, but when you're pouring more than 2 inches, then you go to a different epoxy where the mix is totally different.
right,
So instead of being 1 to 1, it's probably 2 to 1. I don't know exactly,
yes,
but it's a different mix. Yeah.
yeah, because some of those dioramas or models they make of those type of scenes are quite spectacular, especially with the lighting effects that they put in there as well. Let's have a
Well,
little look. Uh, yeah,
I was gonna say, like, um, there's so many examples on YouTube that you can look at. I think of Luke Townend, for example, or oh, can't remember his name. Those people, like, they really explain how to do it, especially with resin.
yes,
Um, then I can't remember who did one with gel. It was like a fisher, like a fishing area
yes,
where the waves were, it was beautiful. Or you have Boomer Diorama that did just paint, and I think he used Mod Podge. That's it. So there's different ways. Uh, Depends on how much you're willing to pay, how much time you want to spend,
yes.
and how many problems you might want to face when things go wrong.
Oh dear. So I'll have a look over here. The elves have been sorting through the chat and put some questions up in the on the screen here. So we'll have a look at a few of those. Um, it says you like myself, you've enjoyed going out on a few cruises and you've travelled over a fair bit of water. A lot of people paint water blue, but but water isn't blue. I've never seen a blue hunk of water. It's usually a lot different colours. What colours are your preference for doing
Uh,
water?
Water is clear. It's everything that's underneath that gives, like, for example, when you go on a cruise and the water looks like turquoise. It looks very nice, but it's really clear. It's the corals, the way the sun shines in the water that will give you different colors.
Yes.
When I look at the pond near where I live, if I was to take a glass of water, it's not brown. It's
Yes.
clear. It's the the sand at the bottom, or yeah. So it depends what color you want, but yeah, water is not blue.
No.
If you're doing a little stream with rapids, then you might have it clear because it's not deep enough.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So um,
Well, I guess
yeah,
that leads on to next questions and the I guess the material and the way you do it and whether you're going to be colouring is going to depend on how deep the water is. If you're trying to do an ocean scene or something like that, well, you'll probably have a painted surface. But if you're doing a creek or something small, I plan to do a small creek on the layout here. I can hear the production staff in the background of NMRAx falling off their chairs laughing at the moment. But yes, I do have a creek planned in here, and I think it's going to have a collection of mini prints, shopping carts in the bottom of it, and garbage and bits and pieces. So yeah. So
uh,
going on from that colours question, do you ever stain the water mediums that you use before you use them, or do you paint on top of them, or?
no, the water I use, well, like I said, I use resin, epoxy resin, and I'll do the mix, and then I'll take my acrylic paint and just put one drop mix, and usually it's still you can almost see through, but for example, it will be a very light brown, but I can see through the mix. Then I'll add another drop, and until I get the right color that I'm looking for. But yeah, you got the first time I think I was doing can't remember what, yeah, it must have been another brown. And I think I put like 6, 7 drops, and it was totally brown. I mean, no,
Yeah,
it didn't look right.
yeah,
So but if you're gonna cover rocks and you're gonna put a little fish in there, no, I would go with probably 1 or 2 drops of the color that you want.
okay,
But definitely not turquoise.
yes, yeah, yeah. Another one of the questions I got here says, can you add or can you mix mediums to get additional effects? And if you do, how long should you wait between applications?
Well, I know that I used Mod Podge to create not waves, but like let's say a windy day, you'll have just small ripples on the water. That I'll use Mod Podge. But if I want, uh, for example, near rocks, I'm gonna want to put some gel to make it like a little splash. I'll wait till it's totally dry, and then I'll do the gel. I just don't want to take a chance that I'll screw up or something. So one thing at a time.
So you'll give it a couple of days between
Yeah.
to
Well,
cure. And,
Mod Podge will dry, I'd say, oh, I was going to say an hour or two, it's dry. I mean, a very thin layer. It dries pretty fast. So 2, 3 hours later, I could put the gel, but then the gel I'll probably have to wait a full day.
yeah. Another question that we had here was, do you have any ideas on how you could attempt doing breaking waves at the ocean, or have you seen any examples of breaking surf? Like I said, if you go to another shameless plug, if you go to the NMRA Museum at the Cal State Rail Museum, you'll see it on Smuggler's Cove. There is some breaking waves there. Um, but
That's
what do you
usually that's usually used with gel. Uh, Medium gel could do it, but I would go with the heavy gel. You could really carve the way you want the wave to break.
Yes.
and wait for it to dry a bit, and you could add more, especially if you want the curve. Like you can start with the curve and then add a little bit more and add a little bit more for like a bigger break. But yeah, you can't do that. Uh, I wouldn't do that in one shot. I would
Yes.
take my time and get it right.
Well, being as you're our scenery guru, I think you might have to have a bit of a play around with that and see what you can come up with.
Well, everything needs, I'd say the best way is to test.
Yep.
If you're going to use epoxy, use two little cups, mix them together, add a drop of paint, and see if this is what you like.
Yes. Yep.
Same thing with the gel, do it somewhere else. I remember the first time I used Mod Podge, I used matte. And when I looked at it, it looked terrible. But then I saw a video that said you could use like white glue. Yeah, but white glue is matte. So I was able to just remove it. Like it came off really good.
Well,
So yeah, you
I,
got
I
to test.
must stop you here. I see someone's typing furiously in my little teletype here, saying that we're up, where time is up, and we've got to move on. Lloyd,
Okay,
thanks a million for that. That was really informative and entertaining,
I'll
and
see you in
we'll
June.
look forward to your next sojourn into the world of trees. And before I get into any more trouble by the production staff here, who I think Speed's probably pulling his hair out in the bottom of the helix by now, so I'll wrap it up and I'll say thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Okay, take care.